You know, you'd think a prison guard, someone who's supposed to protect people, would be the last person you'd expect to be capable of something so brutal.
Yeah.
But the story of Milena Molano, this 34-year-old mother of two from Colombia, well, it just reveals this chilling truth about domestic violence.
Right.
It can be hidden in plain sight,
Absolutely.
even in places where we think it would never happen.
Yeah. So we're diving deep today into the events that led up to her death.
Okay.
And we'll be exploring the wider context of femicide in Colombia.
Right.
It's a story that's heartbreaking.
It is.
And unfortunately far too common.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What makes Milena's case especially disturbing is the involvement of her partner, Marlio Cachaya. He was a prison guard.
Really.
So this isn't just a tragic incident.
Right.
This raises questions about power dynamics in law enforcement and whether these structures can sometimes foster a sense of impunity.
It's a scary thought that abusers can be anywhere, even in professions that are, dedicated to upholding the law.
So let's go back to the beginning. It was June 16th, 2023, when Milena disappeared.
Right. She was last seen leaving her home in Florencia, a city in southern Colombia.
Okay.
She had been planning to leave Cachaya and return to her hometown with her kids.
Wow.
Can you imagine the fear and the desperation of her family?
Oh, I bet, yeah.
As the days turned into nights and there was no sign of her.
Do you think her family suspected Cachaya right away?
Not necessarily, because remember, he was a prison guard, someone they probably associated with safety and authority.
Right, of course.
So it's really a tragic illustration of how abusers can manipulate perceptions and keep up a respectable front.
It's just chilling to think that someone who's supposed to be protecting people could be capable of such violence.
Yeah.
Then on June 20th, the worst possible news came. Milena's body was found.
The circumstances surrounding her death were horrifying.
Really?
They found her dismembered body in the Rio Hacha, hundreds of kilometers from her home.
Wow.
It was a clear attempt to hide the crime and make it hard to identify her.
Right, but for the investigators, the brutality of the act and the fact that Milena was planning to leave that pointed straight to Cachaya. This wasn't just murder. This feels like a calculated act of rage and control.
You're absolutely right to pick up on that.
Yeah.
The way her body was dismembered methodically, it really points to premeditation.
Oh, wow.
This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a planned attempt to exert ultimate control, even in death.
So Milena's decision to leave Cachaya, to start fresh for herself and her children, that's what triggered this horrible violence.
Unfortunately, this is a common pattern we see in a lot of femicide cases.
Really?
When a woman tries to break free from a controlling partner, it can cause a violent backlash.
Wow.
The perpetrator feels like they're losing control, and they resort to these extreme measures to try to reassert their dominance.
It's heartbreaking to think that her wanting a better life led to her death.
It is.
Were there any signs that this could have been prevented?
Well, Milena had told her family about Cachaya's controlling and aggressive behavior.
Oh,
And this just highlights how important it is to listen to and believe those who disclose abuse.
yeah.
It's easy to dismiss red flags when someone seems trustworthy.
Yeah, especially a prison guard.
Exactly. But it's so important to remember that abusers can be very manipulative and good at hiding their true nature.
And his position of authority probably made it even harder for Milena to speak up or get help.
Absolutely.
That's terrifying.
The power dynamics within law enforcement can create this culture of silence where victims are afraid to speak out because they fear retaliation or don't think anyone will believe them.
Right.
And when the perpetrator is in a position of power in that system, the risks are even greater.
So even though we don't know exactly what happened the night Milena was murdered,
Right.
we can see from the evidence that Cachaya's job as a prison guard likely played a big part in both how violent it was and in how he tried to cover it up.
Absolutely.
It's a chilling reminder that even those who are supposed to protect us can become the ones who hurt us.
And that leads us to a bigger question. What are the things in our society that allow these tragedies to happen?
Right.
How does a country deal with the huge problem of femicide, especially when it's committed by the people in power?
Yeah.
And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay with us as we look into the broader issue of femicide in Colombia and what Milena's story tells us about the fight for justice and the need for real change.
Yeah.
Milena's case is like a wake-up call, isn't it?
Yeah.
It forces us to look at the reality of femicide in Colombia.
Right.
It's not just about one person's tragedy.
No, it's not.
It's a reflection of a bigger problem in society.
Absolutely. And the femicide rates in Colombia are just tragically high.
Yeah.
And what's even more concerning is that a lot of cases like Milena's involve this level of brutality. Like there's this intense hatred and a need to control.
You mentioned before that Colombia has one of the worst rates of femicide in all of Latin America.
Yeah, it's true.
What are some of the reasons for that?
Well, there are a bunch of factors, but one of the big ones is this machismo culture that's really ingrained in many parts of Latin America.
Okay.
And, this traditional view of masculinity, it often promotes this idea that men are dominant and should control women.
Oh, I see.
And that creates an environment where violence can happen.
So it's not just about individual acts of aggression, right? It's more like a cultural problem that almost makes violence against women seem normal.
Exactly. It's about challenging those cultural norms
Yeah.
and really pushing for respect and equality.
But it sounds like it's more than just changing attitudes.
It is.
There are also problems with the system itself that need to be fixed.
Right? Like, the legal system often doesn't do a good job of protecting women who report abuse.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, there's a lack of resources, cases pile up, and sometimes there's even corruption within law enforcement.
Wow.
So it creates this feeling that perpetrators can get away with it.
And then on top of all that, in Milena's case, the abuser was a prison guard.
Exactly, and that makes everything even more complicated.
Right, because he's part of this system that's supposed to be protecting people.
Exactly. When the abuser holds a position of authority, especially within the justice system,
Right.
it creates these extra obstacles for victims who are trying to get help.
They probably don't even think anyone's going to believe them.
Exactly. They might be afraid of retaliation or doubt that their claims will be taken seriously.
It's like a terrible catch-22.
It is.
The people who should be protecting you are the ones you're afraid of.
Exactly.
So how do we even begin to fix these systemic problems?
Well,
What needs to change to really address femicide in Colombia?
it's going to take a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
We need stricter laws, and we need to make sure those laws are enforced so that abusers are held accountable.
But it's not just about punishment, right?
No, it's not.
We also have to focus on preventing it from happening in the first place.
Absolutely. And what does prevention look like in this context?
Yeah, what does that actually mean?
Well, it means we need to address the root causes of gender-based violence
Okay,
through things like education and awareness campaigns.
I see.
We have to challenge those harmful stereotypes, promote healthy relationships, and teach young people about consent and respect.
So we need to start changing the culture when kids are young.
Exactly, and we need to provide support services for victims.
Okay, like what kinds of services?
Things like safe spaces, shelters, access to legal aid, and counseling to help women escape those abusive situations and start over.
This sounds like a huge task.
It is?
Where do we even start?
I know it can feel overwhelming,
Yeah.
but even small steps can make a difference, and there are so many organizations in Colombia doing incredible work to fight violence against women.
So what can we do to help?
You can support those organizations by donating your time volunteering or just spreading the word about what they do.
It's about using whatever skills and resources we have
Exactly.
to make a difference, even if it seems small.
Right, and never underestimate how powerful your voice can be.
What do you mean?
Contact your elected officials and tell them to support policies that protect women and hold abusers accountable.
That's a good idea.
Share information about femicide on social media, start conversations with your friends and family.
Yeah.
The more we talk about it, the less stigma there will be for survivors to come forward and get help.
It's about creating a movement where everyone's demanding change.
Exactly.
Milena's family has been so outspoken in their fight for justice.
They have.
They've turned their personal tragedy into a call to action.
They have.
What kind of impact has their advocacy had?
Their courage and determination have been inspiring.
Yeah.
They've brought national attention to Milena's case, which has led to demands for police reform and more accountability within law enforcement.
Wow, that's great.
Their story has resonated with so many people who've also lost loved ones to femicide.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's created this feeling of solidarity and a shared purpose.
It's amazing how they've turned their grief into something positive.
It is, but I'm sure the fight for justice is long and tiring.
It must be.
What do you think keeps families like Milena's going?
That's a good question.
It's the hope that their loved one's death won't be meaningless.
Yeah.
That by sharing their story and demanding change, they can prevent other families from going through the same pain.
Right.
It really shows the strength of the human spirit and the love that drives them to fight for a better future.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope
There is.
and a reason to keep fighting.
There is.
And sometimes that fight can inspire a whole movement
Absolutely.
and get others to join the cause and demand change.
It can.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into Milena Molano's case, let's turn our attention to you, our listener.
Okay.
What can you do to make a difference?
Yeah.
How can you contribute to the fight against femicide, not just in Colombia, but everywhere?
That's a really important question, and it's one that deserves some thought.
Yeah.
Let's look at some practical steps you can take to become an advocate for change, to challenge harmful norms, and to support those affected by gender-based violence.
So we've been talking about taking action.
Right.
Like, what can we actually do
Yeah.
to combat femicide? And it can seem overwhelming,
Yeah.
especially when the problem feels so huge and so ingrained.
Absolutely.
But you were saying that even small things matter.
Yeah, they do.
What are some examples of what those small actions could look like?
Well, sometimes the smallest actions can have the biggest impact.
Okay.
And it starts with just being aware of the problem.
Oh.
Educate yourself about femicide in your own community
Right.
and around the world.
Okay.
Because understanding how big the problem is the first step to finding solutions.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly.
But what do we do with that knowledge once we have it?
Well, you can start by challenging harmful stereotypes in language whenever you come across them.
Okay.
So if you hear someone making a sexist joke
Right.
or dismissing a woman's experience, speak up.
It's a good idea.
Those little acts of defiance, they can start to chip away at the cultural norms that are allowing this violence to continue.
So it's about creating a culture where those kinds of comments aren't okay anymore,
Yeah,
and where people are held responsible for what they say and do.
exactly. And don't forget, sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen.
Yeah.
If someone tells you they're being abused, believe them.
Okay.
Support them without judging them. Let them know they're not alone.
That makes me think about what you said earlier about supporting organizations that are working to stop violence against women.
Right.
How can our listeners get involved?
There are so many organizations out there doing amazing work.
Yeah.
Do some research and find one that speaks to you.
Okay.
You can volunteer your time, donate money, or even just spread the word about what they're doing.
So it's about using whatever skills and resources we have to make a difference,
Exactly.
however big or small.
Right. And never underestimate the power of your voice.
In what way?
Contact your elected officials and tell them to support policies that protect women and hold abusers accountable. Share information about femicide on social media. Talk about it with your friends and family.
Right.
The more we talk about it, the easier it will be for survivors to come forward and get help.
So it's about creating a movement
Exactly.
where everyone's demanding change.
You got it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Milena Molano's case,
Yeah.
I want to leave you, our listener, with this thought.
Okay.
What will you do today to create a world where women are safe, respected, and empowered?
It's a question we're thinking about. We all have a role to play in this fight, and even the smallest actions can help create a better future.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for listening.
We hope you found this exploration informative and thought-provoking.
We did too.
Remember, stay curious,
Yeah.
stay engaged, and stay hopeful.
Absolutely.
Together, we can make a difference.
If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into more cases like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like the video if you found the story compelling, and share it with your friends and family who might be interested in true crime and mysteries. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with all our latest content and join a growing community of curious minds exploring the most fascinating cases. Click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything.